Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to tackle a really uncomfortable question.
Big one.
Yeah. Why do these massive, grinding societal problems, things like intergenerational poverty or chronic homelessness, why do they and the people caught in them seem to just constantly fall out of the conversation?
Right. They're physically there, but it's like they're absent from our collective awareness.
Exactly. And so today, we are diving deep into that very dynamic. Our mission is to dissect this layered, active process that our sources call structural invisibility. We've looked at material that argues this is absolutely not an accident. It's more of a coordinated disappearing act enforced by psychology, technology, and sociology all working together.
And that's really the crucial point to get right from the start. This invisibility, it isn't passive. It's not just something that happens.
It's a mechanism.
It's a mechanism, a kind of societal self-protection. It's the result of three, really powerful filters, one in our minds, one in our media, and one built right into the physical design of our society.
All working together.
All working together to create this huge, but ultimately very comfortable societal blind spot.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with the most personal one, the most intimate mechanism. Why we, as individuals, choose to look away.
Yeah.
The sources are so direct about this. They call it the active stripping of sight. It sounds harsh, but it really gets to how the mind works to protect itself.
It's entirely about psychological defense. The sources explain that when you directly confront evidence of systemic suffering, it's not a neutral thing. It's not just watching the news.
Right.
It creates this immediate, intense, and negative emotional cost for you, the observer. You're forced to deal with this conflict between what you're seeing and what you believe should be happening.
And that burden, how does it show up?
Well, it typically comes out in three really heavy emotions. The first one is guilt. And not always guilt for causing the problem, but, guilt for living comfortably right alongside it. The second is a heavy sense of responsibility, this feeling that you should be doing something. But the one that really drives the evasion, the most overwhelming one, is powerlessness.
And that distinction is so important. We're not talking about just apathy, like people don't care.
No, not at all.
We're talking about that paralyzing feeling. The realization that this suffering comes from these huge structural problems, policy, economics, that one person just can't dismantle overnight.
Precisely. And that feeling of powerlessness is it's intensely destabilizing. So to escape that pain, the public subconsciously engages in what the sources call selective blindness.
We just choose to look somewhere else.
We actively and, functionally choose to redirect our attention. We look at easier things, more solvable things, or just more entertaining things, really, all to maintain our own comfort and our psychological peace.
So that comfort becomes the goal of our attention.
Yes. It's less about avoiding the people themselves and more about avoiding the incredibly painful mental work that's required to acknowledge their situation.
So if that pain is too much, the mind basically installs a filter to keep functioning. I thought the analogy the sources used for this was just unforgettable.
The soft focus filter.
Yeah, the automatic soft focus filter installed right on our internal camera lens.
And think about how that works. When your attention is on, say, glamorous social media or some movie or just your own friends, the image is sharp. Everything makes sense.
But the second that lens scans over a scene of chronic poverty or neglect,
the filter just clicks on automatically.
And the result of that blurring, it protects us, the observer, from the shock and the guilt. But the person in that system, they become an abstraction.
They're no longer a specific person with a name and a story.
They just become, and this is a quote, an unidentifiable blurred background in our social cognition. They're just visual noise we've managed to cancel out. Which brings us from our own minds to the massive tech systems all around us. If we're already primed to look away for our own comfort, how does the attention economy then step in and, basically monetize that exact behavior?
It really establishes what the sources call the fundamental cruelty of the system. In our digital world, attention is the scarcest currency. It's everything.
It's the whole business model.
It is. And algorithms are driven by one cold metric: engagement. Because engagement translates into profit. So they have to constantly serve up content that gives a high return on that attention investment.
Which creates an immediate problem for covering systemic hardship.
An immediate rejection, yeah. If you look at these problems, intergenerational debt, a housing crisis, they are, by their nature, long-term, slow, and lack dramatic, rapid intensity.
Right. Slow decay doesn't generate clicks, not like a big conflict or a celebrity scandal does. The suffering is just, it's too abstract, it's too slow,
Yep.
and it has no novelty. It can't go viral.
Exactly. Chronic suffering just can't generate those quick click rates. And if it doesn't immediately translate to profitable engagement, the algorithm deems it ineffective information.
Wow. So it's not that the information isn't there.
No, the data is available. The problem is that the data is boring in the context of the attention marketplace. The algorithm's conclusion is to just filter it out, push it down the feed, erase it from the digital social consciousness.
And in doing so, it basically rewards the psychological avoidance we just talked about.
It institutionalizes it.
But this is where we see that that cynical exception to the rule. Because the only time these groups get guaranteed traffic is during an extreme tragedy.
The spectacular incident, a crime, something that just breaks through the noise.
But that burst of attention is a trap, isn't it? The sources describe it as being totally sensationalist. It's Docker-style attention.
Completely. People click because the event is shocking, or it feeds that desire for drama, not because they're suddenly engaging with the systemic roots of the problem.
And that short, intense burst of visibility, it actually makes the long-term invisibility worse.
It does, because the tragic event is isolated, it's sensationalized, it's treated as this one single horrifying thing, not the inevitable result of the slow, chronic issues the algorithm normally hides.
So once the spectacle is over, the traffic drops.
And the algorithms move on instantly,
Yeah.
cementing that group right back into their normal state of being unseen. The temporary spotlight actually protects the system from scrutiny.
And that leads us perfectly to the next big analogy for this digital filter. The algorithm is like the powerful commercial stage spotlight operator.
Yeah, and this operator has one job: maximize the audience, maximize the revenue. The spotlight, which is our traffic, our public attention, it only ever hits the high-drama, brightly dressed actors.
That's the content that sells tickets.
That's what keeps eyes on the screen.
And the people suffering from these chronic slow burn issues.
They're the slow-moving, gray-clad extras in the corner of the stage. The light will actively ignore them because, well, they're not profitable.
Please stay in the dark.
They stay in the dark unless they suddenly fall to create a loud noise. A tragedy. At which point the spotlight swivels for a moment, but only to highlight the noise itself.
Before turning right back to the profitable drama.
And abandoning that corner of the stage completely.
So what does this actually look like when you layer that psychological evasion and the algorithmic filtering onto the, I guess, the foundational structure of society?
Well, the sources make it really clear. This becomes a total comprehensive isolation. It's enforced physically, digitally, and psychologically.
Let's start with physically.
Okay, so we see this profound dual mechanism of segregation. First, in physical space, these vulnerable communities are subjected to deliberate removal.
Like actually moved.
Yeah. This can be geographical banishment, where they're pushed to the edges of the city because they can't access transit or affordable housing. Or it can be visual blocking, where their neighborhoods are literally shrouded from view.
I mean, you can see this in the design of modern infrastructure, right?
Absolutely. Think about huge, inaccessible highways that just cut off neighborhoods. Or the placement of these towering luxury condo buildings that intentionally block the line of sight toward public housing.
It's a very effective strategy.
Incredibly, physical distance very quickly becomes psychological distance. It justifies our soft focus filter.
And then digitally, the isolation is just as complete.
It is. The digital divide isn't just about lacking the tools, the hardware or the internet connection. Critically, it's about lacking the agency to control your own story online.
They become non-existent in the digital public square.
Essentially, their stories, if they show up at all, are just reduced to cold figures in some government database. Statistics on unemployment, numbers on a public health chart.
The human narrative is completely stripped away.
It is. It's replaced by these abstract data points that conveniently remove all the emotional and moral weight for the person looking at them.
This comprehensive isolation, physical, digital, psychological, it must have some kind of deep structural idea justifying it.
It does, and that's where the sources bring in the foundational sociological concept that ties this all together. Zygmunt Bauman's concept of wasted lives.
Okay, what does that mean?
Bauman's work argues that in the process of modernization, society ruthlessly reduces a person's value down to their economic function.
Are you a producer? Or are you a consumer?
That's it. And if the answer to both of those is no, the system deems you part of a superfluous population. You cease to have any functional utility within the economic machine.
And that designation is incredibly powerful. It fundamentally shifts the responsibility.
It does. If people are designated as superfluous or waste, the system is no longer responsible for their well-being. Its only job is to manage them, keep them out of sight.
So they're structurally ignored, pushed to the periphery.
Because they're seen as disposable byproducts of progress. They're not victims of bad policy. They're waste products of efficiency.
The analogy for wasted lives is maybe the most sobering one of all. It frames modern society as a supermarket. The only people in the spotlight, the only ones who get attention, are the people who can produce value. The employees, or the people who can buy that value, the customers.
And if you can't do either, if you lack production and consumption power,
you're treated like discarded waste, like broken packaging or overripe fruit that threatens the smooth, efficient flow of commerce.
So you're quickly moved to the dark, non-operational back corners, out of sight of the paying public, just to preserve that profitable, comfortable illusion of the supermarket.
Wow.
And that brings us to the final, really powerful image of isolation the sources give us, the comparison to a one-way glass.
Okay, so we've seen the mechanism. The psychological filter, the algorithmic spotlight, the economic designation of waste. How does the one-way glass tie it all together?
Well, the mainstream public lives on the bright, lit side of the glass, and when they look at it, they only see their own reflection.
Their entertainment, their technology, their clean economic story.
Exactly. And the vulnerable groups are on the dark side, unheard and unseen. Our attention, our resources, they just can't penetrate the glass to get to them.
Until they're forced to break the glass.
Until they cause a tragedy, which momentarily shatters that comfortable reflection and forces a brief, painful moment of clarity before the glass reforms.
It's a really powerful and clarifying synthesis of why certain problems just persist. We've mapped this structural invisibility back to its three interconnected forces.
Right. Psychological avoidance, which is driven by our need for comfort.
Algorithmic filtering that financially rejects slow, non-dramatic suffering.
And then structural segregation combined with that ruthless waste of lives economic logic that just designates certain people as expendable.
The explicit takeaway from all the source material seems to be that seeing is a choice, and it is a moral responsibility.
It is. We know now that the default setting for our minds and our media is to just blur these issues out. So breaking that cycle, it requires more than just, random public sympathy after a big tragedy.
It takes more than that.
It takes institutional safeguards, of course, but fundamentally it requires the active gazing of observers, the conscious, difficult choice to look exactly where the lens wants to automatically soften and blur.
And that leads to our final thought for you to carry forward, building on everything we've discussed. If our society is constantly employing what are basically mind's noise-canceling headphones to ensure our psychological comfort and to systematically push away all uncomfortable truths, what are the deep structural costs we're racking up under the surface of all that quiet? What happens to a social safety system when its entire ability to respond is utterly dependent on whether or not suffering is extreme enough to become a viral, spectacular tragedy?
It's a dangerous dependence.
Something to think about until our next deep dive.